Today we are discussing the JHS pedals box set later, a pedal that's received a lot of attention ever since it was first spotted on John Mayer's pedalboard. We're going to be discussing everything we know about this pedal, some kind of newer information around what it actually is and how it functions, and the possibility, the very small possibility, that it could become John Mayer's first signature pedal ever. So let's dive right on into this video. All right, so we have to go all the way back to the start of 2021 and actually NAMM. Now, you guys might not even remember, but Martin did a kind of improvisational NAMM session where they did something called the Jam in Place. And John actually went out and performed a couple of songs. You know, it was a cool performance. But one of the interesting things is that in his house where he was performing from and kind of, calling in the performance, he had a makeshift studio set up there where he performed in. There were some amps in the background, but there were 3 pedals on the floor of his kind of house, on his rug, in his little studio. And one of the pedals was this black JHS pedal, and you could tell it was a JHS pedal by the placement of the logo on kind of the front face of the pedal, where JHS always has their logo on their pedals. And that was really it. Some random pedal no one could identify that was clearly JHS, but that was it. We didn't have really any context other than it was in kind of this isolated area with some amplifiers and a couple other pedals on the floor, but that was pretty much about it. And then fast forward to the Dead & Company Summer 2021 tour, this pedal makes a return, but this time on John's actual pedal board. So we could kind of slowly start to make a connection here with John maybe getting the pedal early 2021, late 2020, maybe messing around with it in a little bit of perhaps studio work if he did for Sob Rock, who knows? But it was on the pedal board for Summer 2021 Dead & Company's that tour. And then through this, we could at least tell it had one switch and 2 knobs on it. That was kind of all we really had to go with at this point, because a lot of the photos we got initially during the 2021 Dead & Company Summer Tour, they just weren't that great for shots of John's pedal board. Now, in August of 2021, Josh Scott posted this photo with the caption, "Sometimes mystery is a good thing." This was really interesting because Josh Scott obviously was knowing that we were very interested, all of us John Mayer fans, we were very interested in knowing what the heck did you design for John now, because it was pretty clear, even without a great shot of John's board, that this was a JHS pedal. And a few things from the shot that we can actually tell, like we can tell that the knobs were input and output. That was something we gained from the shot. We kind of knew what the 2 knobs at least did. And then that appeared to have a send and return loop as well, because there were 2 inputs and outputs. And the only thing that kind of made sense would be that it would have some sort of like internal loop, effects loop built into it, because it clearly wasn't a like stereo pedal. That wasn't what it was. So that pretty much was what it had to be in terms of the 4 kind of jacks that you saw on the pedal. Now, eventually we got this photo, which, even though it's only a half decent photo, we could just barely kind of make out that it at least said box and later on it, and that was kind of part at least of the name of the pedal. And I believe it was my friend Ryan Colgan, the tone geek, who actually mentioned and kind of was first to kind of theorize that this might actually be some sort of version of the Dumble A Box Later, which is this super rare, essentially kind of like a Dumbleator in a pedal format. And we had known that John had one from shots that we'd had of just his collection of gear and effects and everything. We knew John had one, but his use of it was very, very limited, and we really didn't know exactly if it was just something he had collected or what he'd actually used it for. But then seeing this pedal, I think Ryan was the very first one to make that connection between the 2 and think, wait a minute, did Josh Scott essentially make a Box Later version for John that he could actually use in a more pedalboard friendly format? Now, years ago when Tumblr was really a thing, John was actually fairly active on that platform. He posted a photo of his personal A Box Later with this quote, "One of a kind A Box Later, Box Later, ? By Howard Dumble, an external effects loop that also acts as a line driver and clean boost." So right there from John, we gained some pretty valuable insight as to what the pedal actually was used for. We knew that it had an external effects loop that was a line driver at the same time, and then a clean boost as well. So this pedal had a lot of different areas that it could actually be used for. So through that in of it itself, we kind of learned more information about the pedal. Now, there's one thing with the quote from John. I don't want you guys to take literally that when he says it's one of a kind, that there's actually only one of these pedals out there. I know from very reliable sources that Howard Alexander Dumble made a few pedals. I'm not sure exactly how many are out there, probably a handful or less, but there is more than one of them out there. John doesn't own the only one in existence. I know someone who was in a room with one a couple weeks back. So there are maybe 3, 4 floating around out there, but there's not just one of these out there. And John would continue to use this pedal on all of his Dead & Company pedal boards. We'd see it show up all the time on those boards. And then of course, kind of famously as well, John during the solo tour was using 3 different pedal boards, and on the electric pedal board, this pedal was also featured on it for the entire solo tour, essentially. So it started to make a transition into some of John's kind of main stuff, his kind of main tours, his own solo kind of career outside of Dead & Company. So we saw it transition from being essentially a strictly Dead & Company pedal to getting used in outside cases as well, which was really cool. And then fast forward to March of 2024, Guitar Magazine Japan actually went to the Blue Note Tokyo performances during the solo tour and did a full article on all of John's gear that he used for those performances during the solo tour. And we have some further insight right from Jeremy, John's guitar tech, and them being there physically with all of the gear, of course, with this high resolution shot is from, essentially on the box it later. So I'm going to read from this. I translated it from the Japanese to the English for you guys. It's not going to be perfect. I'm going to try and fill in the gaps where I can, but we're going to just go through this direct quote here. Pedal number 4, Box It Later, is made by JHS Pedals, a pedal brand in Missouri, USA, and is a clone of a pedal called a Box Later, made by Dumble. Right there, we know exactly what it is. It is considered to be a custom-made product because it's not a catalog model. That's them just referring to the fact that JHS doesn't actually produce it. It's not a pedal you can go and buy. And it is a buffered loop box equipped with a clean booster and is equipped with a send return in addition to input and output, but it is unknown which pedal is looped in on this machine. So out of everything we kind of learned from the Guitar Magazine Japan solo tour rig report that they did from the Blue Note Tokyo performances, this is probably the coolest because it's just dead on 100% confirmation that Josh built this custom-made Box It Later pedal to essentially just be a more pedal board friendly version of that Dumble a Box Later, which is absolutely insane to know. I just think this is so cool to actually have had that information, and of course just an ultra clear shot of the pedal too on John's board. We'd seen some shots where by 2023 summer tour, Dead & Company at least, we knew the name was Box It Later. We had that metal one figured out. Maybe it was Box of Later at first we thought, then we realized it was okay, it's Box It Later. So we already knew the name by this point, but just to get the full down confirmation that it is what we kind of all thought it was, that was really, really cool. But of course, getting the confirmation on kind of the multiple functions of the pedal was easily the best part about this whole thing, because we know that it has a send and return function, but it's also a line driver, and then it can be a clean boost as well. So it's got 3 different uses that John can kind of have. If he has it on his pedal board, he can use it in multiple different ways. And they also mentioned it's unknown which pedal is looped on this machine. And this is kind of key here because if you look at John's pedal board, from what they even said, they believed that the signal chain was all the pedals were in series. They never stated that one of the pedals was actually in the loop of the Box It Later. And I know they chatted with Jeremy, like Jeremy talking about why they actually blacked out John's Klon. He was there talking with them, and I feel like maybe he would have mentioned if I assume he gave them the information on what this pedal actually was, like the story about it being, you know, a clone essentially of a Box Later. I feel like he would have said what pedal was actually in the loop. So this kind of leads to a theory. This is one thing we don't know, but what if the pedal needs something in the send and return loop, whether it's just like a looped cable going from the send to the return? What if it just needs something in there in order to function properly? Like, I don't know. It's possible, like the way they clone this thing. I remember I was talking with Ryan actually, and I believe he's the one who told me that it's possible that it could be kind of set up this way. You never know. But that's kind of one thing that makes sense, because I remember seeing this pedal before and kind of wondering, okay, it looks like there's something in the loop, but in the context of what is on the board, what would John be using in the loop? So I'm kind of leaning towards the fact that maybe he's using it more of either, you know, a buffered line driver or a clean booster. That's kind of my theory as to what John's using the pedal for, but of course, without actually seeing him actively step on it and then hearing an effect come in or something else like modulation or something else, it's impossible to know for certainty. So I really got to give credit to my friend Ryan because he nailed it. he figured out exactly what this thing was, and it was pretty funny that just to see how it all kind of played out. Now, going back to one thing I said at the beginning here of the video, and the possibility that this could be John's very first signature pedal. When you think of John and signature pedals, you think maybe an Ibanez TS10, some sort of fancy Keeley Katana perhaps. But the JHS pedals box at later would be a very interesting one because it's taking something that Dumble made only a few of, if that, and kind of making it a little bit more mass produced. I know there's like the Kleininator, something like that from, I think, Cherrytone makes one. I think there's a couple other companies that make some sort of Dumbleator in more of a pedal format kind of style, so it's not going to be the first of its kind out there. But the kicker with this is sometime a couple weeks back, I really tried hard to find the clip of this or like a story post or like the comment, but I remember very vividly seeing someone ask Josh to make the box later an actual pedal, and Josh's response, and you have to take it with a massive grain of salt, maybe he just was being cheeky, you never know, but he said something along the lines of, and I'm doing my best to remember, that he said something along the lines of, we'd have to run it by John or get a final approval of John or, finalize a production model with John. There was something about getting John's kind of consent or approval on a final product before them releasing it, if they were to go down that pathway, which at that point, it really is, even if it's not a signature pedal, it's like a collaboration between Josh and John to really perfect this kind of thing and maybe even tweak upon Dumble's kind of initial design and just say, well, maybe we prefer it to be this way or that way, and that's the version that we're going to create, heavily inspired, but maybe not a final direct one-to-one clone of a box later sort of thing. So take that with a massive grain of salt here. I could not find any essentially proof that this was a thing, but I think you guys can trust me at this point if I'm saying it. There was something along the lines of that had said. It's probably going to be nothing. It's probably not going to ever be made. It's probably, Josh just answering a question, hypothetically speaking, from what I'm remembering. But the fact that it wasn't just a flat out no is pretty cool. So who knows, maybe a year from now, next summer perhaps, 2025, I'll be making a video that Josh Scott and John Mayer are releasing the A Box Later pedal, and it's essentially John's first signature pedal. I think that would be really wild. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I just don't think it's going to be something that they're going to actually mass produce, but you never know. If John Mayer fans kind of pester Josh Scott enough, maybe he'll make it, because enough people did that with, I believe it was Roxy Pink, at least. They had said that PRS had gotten enough just emails, people calling up their reps and comments online where they were like, Roxy Pink was never fully on the board of something they were going to make. And then the demand was so overwhelming, they just had to be like, yeah, okay, guys, we're going to make it. And we're going to produce it a lot quicker than you probably expect, that they probably even expected to do. So never say never, but I think it's very unlikely. But it would be a cool pedal to see, how everyone else uses it in certain capacities. Maybe other high-profile guitar players would take something like that and throw it on their pedal boards, because it has a lot of uses to it. And it's a very rare kind of cool thing that Dumble built before he, of course, passed away. So it'd be kind of cool to see what would become of something like that. But you never know, too. Maybe as respect to Dumble's legacy, they wouldn't do it. I don't know. It's kind of like that gray area of you want to honor Alexander Howard Dumble and what he did, but you also want to give people a really good product and maybe build upon his idea. So there's that gray area, but I think, if anyone's going to do that right, it would be Josh and John. They would go for sure the absolute right way about it. But I think it's really cool. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. It's been a while since or it's been a long time in the making since I was planning on making the Box Later video, because that's something you guys obviously want to have heard touched on and kind of in some details, my thoughts on it. So yeah, kind of a video just chilling, discussing it, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, that pretty much rounds out the solo tour now, finally, on the channel. It's kind of crazy. It's come and gone, but it's making room for a new era of John's and new music, new tour, and I'm really excited to cover that all with you guys. So until then, take care, everyone, and we'll see you on the next video.